I'm Andrew Niddle. I'm an investigative reporter with the Oklahoman, and I'm here with Brian Bates. A lot of people know you as the video vigilante, but he also is the owner and operator of John TV. It's a website that posts videos and news stories about human trafficking and the local prostitution scene. The reason we're here today is Mr. Bates has started using drones. Well, he's been using them for a while, but recently, in the early part of August, he published a video of very high quality of two people engaging in sex in a public place or private property.
It's private property, but it was in public, yeah.
And we're going to talk with Brian today about that. Give us a little background about how long you've been using drones and kind of, you know, when you started incorporating them into what you do.
All right. Well, I've been doing my activism going on 20 years now, and probably about 5 or 6 years ago, I took an interest in drones. Drones are something that technology is advancing every day. The price point is coming down. I started with what would basically be considered a toy you get at the mall, $400 or $500 toy, but a toy. Thought it might work. It had a camera. You could remotely fly it. Found out real quick there weren't enough safety features, there wasn't enough performance out of the drone, and so I abandoned that. And then about 2 years ago, something like that, I started investing in the drones coming out of DJI, and much more advanced, a little higher price point, but still very affordable, and much safer than drones that had been out at that price point earlier. And so it was something I started carrying with me, not really knowing how it was going to work into my activism. If it didn't work up into my activism, I'd use them just as a hobby, just doing other things. But I found that in very, very specific applications, I think a drone is one of the safer ways to go about my activism.
Tell us a little bit about training. Did you just kind of learn to use it on your own, or did you have you taken any classes? I mean, is it just kind of learn as you go?
You know, it's kind of learn as you go. In this day and age, it's you learn by YouTube. You watch as many YouTube videos as you can possibly get. You buy one, you fly them, you crash them. I've been through several drones. This is, you know, my third or fourth one now. And you know, accidents happen, and so you got to get very familiar with them. And I bet I probably spent 100, 200 hours flying it just in open fields in my own yard before I felt comfortable enough to take it anywhere near where there might be people or homes or things like that.
The video that was posted August 6th, I believe, it's two people near a large pile of tires, basically, from what you can see. It's very clear. Can you give us a little background about that particular incident? Did the police, you turn the video over to police? Kind of tell us a little bit about that briefly.
Yeah. On that day, I was out on Robinson. There was a young lady I knew to be a street prostitute. I've caught her several times. She has a criminal record. And I saw her get picked up, dropped off immediately. She gets picked up again. I go to follow the vehicle. But I noticed from the get-go, the vehicle that had just dropped her off was now also following her. And once she decided to direct the John towards a commercial piece of property, a tire dump off of South Robinson and parked, I noticed this other vehicle parked where he could watch her and they could clearly probably see him. That made me think it's possibly her pimp, and that he was possibly aware that I was in the area and he was going to confront me if I went up onto them. And so I decided probably the safest thing to do at that point would be to launch the drone from a safe distance away. So I got a block away where I know they wouldn't know where I am. I launched the drone, located the vehicle, made sure that the people were inside their vehicle so they would be safe from the drone if it was to fall out of the air. And then I lowered the vehicle until I was able to get the visual evidence that's needed to prove that an act of public lewdness is happening. I don't have to prove an exchange of money, I just have to prove the lewd act. And I also wanted to make sure once I had that evidence that they were aware that they were being filmed. So I continued to drop the drone a little lower until they finally saw it and realized we are being filmed, so that they would stop the criminal activity and leave the area. You could tell it took these people a minute to even realize what it was they were looking for. It was the last thing that they expected, and they hightailed it out of there. It just so happens the John, or the customer in this case, I've actually caught him before. And this tape with the drone and a previous tape where I caught him have been turned over to the Oklahoma City Police Department. Oklahoma City Vice says they have identified him. He's in his 80s, and they are working up the paperwork now to see about having him criminally charged.
A lot of people, they're critical about what you do. I mean, I'm sure you've heard all this stuff before. Tell us kind of, why you continue to do the work you do.
Like I said, I'm going on 20 years. Back 19 years ago or so, if someone would have said, you'll still be doing this 20 years from now, I would have said, you're crazy. I started doing it back then because there was a need. I lived in a neighborhood that was literally infested with street prostitution and the pimps and the johns and the drug dealers and everything who comes along with it. And I just found that the police were unable to do anything about it. They wanted us to write down tag numbers and do all those things that didn't work. And one day, I actually captured a lewd act on video. I just walked up, didn't know what to do. I said, "You're busted, buddy. What else do you say?" And it led to a prosecution. It made the news, and it kind of felt like, wow, I'm taking my streets back. And so that motivated me initially. As the years went by, I found that there were stories that continued to need to be told. The busted moment is really just the catalyst that gets somebody's attention, gets them to look at the website. Then once they start dealing deeper in it, they realize there's a lot of stories here. This is a very unacceptable thing that goes on in our community. And it isn't just the act itself, it's that these women are to a point in their life that they're doing this on our streets and that there are men lining up to pick them up. And I've continued to do it all these years because things simply haven't changed. Prostitution is done the same way it's been done for thousands of years. My activism targets specifically street, forced, and organized prostitution. It doesn't target the individual male or female that decides this is the line of work they want to be in behind closed doors. I'm only dealing with people who are literally out there out of desperation, either because a pimp's making them do it or because an addiction's making them do it. Nobody's making the John do it. So I named it John TV, and I focus on the Johns.
And you spend a lot of time kind of getting to know these people. You pour through court documents. Can you talk about, briefly about kind of over the last 20 years, how you've evolved and almost to like a journalist slash videographer slash crusader? Can you just kind of talk a little bit about that?
I've gone through, I think, all the emotions that anybody can have when they're dealing as an observer of this problem. When I initially started, I didn't care what their story was. I didn't have any sympathy for anybody involved. They were roaches and I wanted them gone. The area was infested. As years went by and I actually met a lot of these individuals, I've met the prostitutes, I've met the pimps, I've met the Johns, I started being able to see there were a lot of stories here that needed to be told, and that the women, even though so many people think that these are women that must be doing it willingly, otherwise they would just stop, I realized that was a huge falsehood. And there were no organizations that were dealing with this problem, that were offering help. I'm not a politician, I'm not a doctor, I'm not a social service worker. I'm just an average citizen. The only thing I had to offer was the gotcha moment and to embarrass the city, quite literally, at every opportunity so they would do something about the problem. As the years have gone by, human trafficking has now become the catchphrase. There are now organizations in the city that address this problem. I continue to tell these stories because I've been doing it so long. I think I'm extremely good at it. I certainly haven't, like a lot of activists out there, proven myself to be a hypocrite. I do what I do. I feel compassion towards the people that are involved in this, but I don't take anything that happens out there personally. And as long as I'm able to do this every day, wake up every morning and deal in this and continue to seek solutions, I'm going to continue to do it. It's been 20 years, maybe it'll be another 20.
A lot of people are going to wonder, do you make a living doing this? Can you talk about briefly, just, people are curious about how you're able to, earn a living and how John TV factors into that?
Yeah. Anyone who's paid any attention to my activism knows that years ago I started referring to myself as a commercial activist, so that it would be very transparent that I do make a portion of my living off of the very activism that I do. It allows me to do it full time. It allows me to not take any sort of grant money or money that could be used in other areas. And it's something that, because of the advent of YouTube, the monetization of YouTube channels, and through licensing of my videos, which is primarily where I end up making any of the funds that support what I do, is licensing my videos to production companies all over the world. And what a lot of people don't realize, this activism is very costly. Just to run my website and the bandwidth that's needed and such like that, it can run over $2,000 a month. Items like the drones here can run a couple $1,000, gas, vehicles, all sorts of equipment. So much so that I actually am self-employed in an unrelated area also to help offset those costs. But I feel very fortunate that I can wake up every day and actually spend my entire day doing something that I very much enjoy doing.
Speaking of drones, do you think this is something that you're going to continue to deploy when you're out there in the field working, or how do you feel about the future of drones in your work?
I think the application of drones in so many areas of our lives, law enforcement, hobbyists, commercially, whatever, is huge. The drones ride with me most days when I'm out. I've only deployed them 4 or 5 times. If the opportunity arises and I feel the safest approach is through using a drone, I'll use it. I don't foresee a time where it becomes the first tool that I use, but I certainly see that there is a time and a place for using drones, and when that exists, I'll use them.
You said you deployed it 4 or 5 times, and you have just one video where you're able
Right.
to kind of get them from start to finish. What kind of goes wrong when you're using a drone and you have to kind of abort?
There is a ton of responsibility that goes into flying one of these things. You're basically flying 4 weed eaters in the air, and you can get heights of 1,000 feet or more. Things I want to make sure, the people either have to be on public property or private property I have permission to be on. The people have to be inside their vehicle so there's no danger if the drone was to fall out of the air. And I have to make sure I feel safe where I'm launching the drone. Are there power lines, buildings? A host of things that I really don't even take into consideration when I approach on foot, I have to take into consideration when launching something into the air. And like I said, of the dozens upon dozens of times I've caught people where I had a drone in my car, I've only chose to launch it 4 or 5 times and I've only caught one person. So this certainly isn't my primary tool, but like in the instance where I did catch someone, I felt it was the safest option.